Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The barrel of my custom Sig Sauer didn't shake, but the boy standing in the center of my penthouse living room certainly did. He was a dripping, shivering mess of rainwater and cheap fabric, looking less like an intruder and more like a drowned kitten that had somehow bypassed a retina scanner and 3 layers of reinforced steel security. Lightning fractured the sky outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the terrified pallor of his skin and the unnatural, glowing violet of his eyes, the mark of a high-pedigree Omega in deep distress. He shouldn't have been here. He shouldn't have been alive. And he certainly shouldn't have been clutching the hem of his soaked, oversized sweater, staring down the muzzle of a gun held by the city's most notorious mercenary with an expression that sat somewhere between nausea and fanatical determination. "Give me one reason not to paint the walls with you," I growled, the alpha growl vibrating deep in my chest, instinctive and lethal. "You have 3 seconds. 1. He flinched, his knees knocking together, but he didn't back down. He took a breath that rattled in his small chest. 2. I clicked the safety off. The sound was deafening in the silence of the room. You whistled," he stammered, his voice cracking like thin ice. I paused, my finger hovering over the trigger. "Excuse me. Last night, on the 4th bridge," he whispered, finally looking up to meet my gaze. His face was flushing a deep, feverish red, contradicting the cold rain dripping from his hair. "I was on the railing. I was going to jump. And you walked by, and you whistled at me." I lowered the gun an inch, the memories surfacing through the haze of whiskey and bloodshed that usually constituted my memories. Yes, the bridge. The silhouette of a fragile thing poised to fall into the black water. I hadn't tried to save him. I hadn't called the police. I had merely whistled, a sharp, wolfish sound, mocking the melodrama of it all, and kept walking. "So," I asked, my voice cold, "I whistle at stray dogs, too. It doesn't mean I want to take them home." The boy took a step forward, his hands trembling as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a marriage registration form, already signed in his neat, terrified handwriting. "According to the old laws of the Cobalt District, an alpha who interrupts an Omega's suicide claims the debt of their life," he recited, the words rushed as if he'd practiced them 1,000 times in the mirror. Tears welled in his eyes, but his chin jutted out with desperate defiance. "You interfered. You claimed my attention. You made me step down. Now you have to take responsibility." I stared at him. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. "I'm Dante Vesper," I said slowly, letting the weight of the name settle over him like a shroud. "I kill people for money. I topple governments before breakfast. And you want me to. What? Playhouse." He swallowed hard, the blush spreading down his neck, coloring his pale skin like blood in water. "I want you to marry me, or my father will sell me to the organ harvesters by dawn." The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the rhythmic drumming of rain against the glass. I should have shot him, or at least thrown him out the window he had seemingly materialized from. That would have been the logical, Dante Vesper thing to do. I was a man of violence, a creature of the underworld who viewed attachments as weaknesses and Omegas as liabilities. But then I smelled it. Underneath the scent of rain, fear, and city grime, there was something else. A scent that hit me like a physical blow to the solar plexus. It was soft, sweet, and maddeningly intoxicating, like wild honey and night-blooming jasmine. It was the scent of a compatibility match so high it was statistically impossible. My inner alpha, usually a dormant beast kept in check by discipline and violence, suddenly woke up and roared. "Mine." I holstered the gun. The motion was smooth, practiced. "What is your name, little extortionist?" I asked, walking toward him. He shrank back as I approached, his bravado crumbling the closer I got to his personal space. "Julian. Julian Thorne. Thorne. The ruling family of the Eastern Sector. The aristocrats who looked down on mercenaries like me as filth, even as they hired us to do their dirty work. This boy was the runaway son of Lord Thorne, a man known for his cruelty as much as his wealth." "Well, Julian," I said, stopping inches from him. I towered over him, blocking out the light from the city below. I reached out, gripping his chin with rough fingers, forcing him to look up at me. His skin was fever hot, his pulse hammering against my thumb like a trapped bird. You realize what you're asking? You're trading a shark for a dragon. The dragon whistled. Julian whispered, his eyes wide and watery, his pupils blown wide by the proximity of my pheromones, gunpowder, and ozone. The dragon stopped me from falling. I whistled because I thought you were pathetic. I lied, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. I whistled because I wanted to see if you had the guts to jump or if you were just looking for an audience. It doesn't matter why, Julian insisted, though his voice shook. The law is absolute. You interfered. My life is yours. You either marry me and shield me from my father, or you finish what I started on the bridge yourself. He closed his eyes, tilting his head back, exposing the pale, vulnerable curve of his throat. It was an offering, a submission, a challenge. He was trembling so hard I thought he might shatter, yet he stood there, offering me his life or his death, demanding I choose. For the first time in 10 years, I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a nice smile. Fine, I said, releasing his chin abruptly. He stumbled, gasping for air. You want responsibility? You've got it. But understand this, Julian Thorne, I am not a white knight. I don't do romance, and I certainly don't do gentle. If you stay here, you belong to me. Mind, body, and soul. There is no divorce in my world. Only widowhood. Julian opened his eyes. The fear was still there, vast and consuming, but beneath it lay a strange, twisted relief. I know, he whispered. I'm counting on it. The first week was a study in psychological warfare. I expected him to break. I expected the spoiled aristocrat to cry when he saw the blood I washed off my hands in the kitchen sink, or to scream when my associates, scarred, terrifying men with no manners, came over for briefings. Instead, Julian became a ghost in my apartment. He cleaned. He cooked. He took the designer clothes I ordered for him, black, sleek, fitting for a warlord's consort, and wore them without complaint. He moved silently, always flinching when I entered a room, yet always ensuring my coffee was black and ready when I woke up at noon. He was terrified of me. Every time I looked at him, he blushed crimson and looked at the floor. But he never left. The whistle had created a bond neither of us understood. It wasn't just a legal loophole he had exploited, it was biological warfare. Every day we spent in the same enclosed space, the air grew thicker. The scent of honey and jasmine began to cling to my furniture, my sheets, my clothes. My own scent, aggressive and dark, began to settle into his skin. We were marinating in each other, a slow-cooking recipe for disaster. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I had returned from a job gone wrong. A simple extraction had turned into a firefight. I had a bullet graze on my ribs and a foul temper that made my subordinates flee the moment we hit the lobby. I stormed into the penthouse, stripping off my Kevlar vest and throwing it onto the floor. Blood soaked my shirt. I went straight for the liquor cabinet. Dante, the soft voice cut through the ringing in my ears. Julian was standing in the doorway of the bedroom, clutching a pillow. He looked at the blood on my side, his face draining of color. Get out, I snarled, pouring whiskey over ice. Go to your room, Julian. He didn't move. You're bleeding. I bleed for a living. Go away. He took a step forward. Then another. He looked like he was walking into a lion's den, his body taut with the instinct to flee, but his feet carrying him toward the danger. Let me help, he said. I said get out. I threw the glass. It shattered against the wall, shards raining down on the expensive hardwood. Julian flinched violently, covering his head with his arms. But when the noise settled, he lowered them. He walked over to the bathroom, returned with the first aid kit, and knelt beside the sofa where I had collapsed. You're an idiot, he murmured, his hands shaking as he cut away my ruined shirt. And you're suicidal, I grunted, wincing as he applied antiseptic. The sting was sharp, grounding. Not anymore, he said quietly. I looked down at him. He was focused on the wound, his brow furrowed in concentration. The blush was back, dusting his cheeks as his fingers grazed my skin. He was so close I could count his eyelashes. Why didn't you jump? I asked, the question that had plagued me for weeks finally surfacing. Why did the whistle stop you? Julian paused, his hands hovering over the bandage. He didn't look up. Because it was the first time in my life someone acknowledged I was there without wanting something from me. he confessed, his voice barely audible. Everyone wants my family name, or my inheritance, or my biology. You just made a noise. You treated me like I was just a person on a ledge. It made me realize I was just a person. I didn't have to be Julian Thorne. I could just be the guy the stranger whistled at. He looked up then, his violet eyes locking with mine. And then I saw you. And I knew. Knew what? That you were worse than my father, he whispered. But that you would never lie to me. Something inside me snapped. The restraint I had been exercising, the fragile barrier holding back the beast, crumbled. I reached out, tangling my hand in his silver hair, and pulled him forward. He gasped, his hands bracing against my chest, right over my pounding heart. You have no idea what you've walked into, I muttered against his lips. I am going to ruin you for everyone else, Julian. Good, he breathed, closing the distance. The kiss was not gentle. It was a collision of desperation and possessiveness, a sealing of the contract he had forged in the ring. He tasted like sweet tea and fear. I tasted like whiskey and violence. It was perfect. The honeymoon period, if one could call it that, lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, the Thorne family made their move. I should have anticipated it. Lord Thorne was a politician. He didn't fight with guns, he fought with leverage. While I was meeting with a client, a specialized retrieval team, sanctioned by the government, immune to my usual security protocols, raided the penthouse. I returned to find the door blown off its hinges and the apartment empty. No note. No ransom demand. Just the lingering scent of Julian's distress, sour, panicked fear, and the smell of industrial sedatives. They had taken him. Rage is a cold thing for some men. For me, it was a nuclear meltdown. I didn't make calls. I didn't negotiate. I went to the armory in the basement of the building, loaded every weapon I owned into the back of my armored SUV, and drove to the Thorne estate. The right of interference Julian had cited was an old law, obscure and mostly forgotten. But in the underworld, there is a simpler law. Asterisk, you break it, you buy it. You steal it, you die. Asterisk, I drove through the front gates of the estate. Literally. The reinforced steel buckled under the impact of the bull bar. Security personnel swarmed, firing rounds that sparked harmlessly off my bulletproof glass. I exited the vehicle with an assault rifle in one hand and a combat knife in the other. Where is he? I roared, my voice amplified by the tactical mask I wore. It took me 10 minutes to cut through the outer defenses. By the time I reached the main hall, the pristine marble floors were scuffed and littered with the groaning bodies of elite guards. I hadn't killed them. Julian wouldn't like that, but they wouldn't be walking for a long time. I kicked open the doors to the drawing room. Lord Thorne stood by the fireplace, a glass of brandy in his hand, looking pale. Julian was seated in a chair in the center of the room, his hands bound, a bruise blooming on his cheekbone. When Julian saw me, blood-spattered, terrifying, a demon rising from hell, he didn't scream. He sobbed, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. You, Lord Thorne stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are trespassing. I have the National Guard on speed dial. Call them, I said, stepping over a broken statue. They can help clean up the mess I'm about to make of you. I walked straight to Julian. I knelt, ignoring the lord of the house, and used the combat knife to slice the ropes binding his wrists. Did they hurt you? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Julian threw his arms around my neck, burying his face in the crook of my shoulder. I told him, he wept. I told him you would come. I told him the whistle was a claim. I stood up, lifting Julian with me as if he weighed nothing. I turned to his father. You have a choice, I told the old man. You can sign the transfer of guardianship and all rights to his inheritance over to me right now. Or I can burn this house down with you inside it. You can't be serious, Thorne sputtered. He is my son. He is an Omega. He needs structure, discipline. He has me, I said flatly. I am all the structure he will ever need. I looked at Julian. Tell him. Julian lifted his head. The timid boy from the bridge was gone. In his place was the mate of a warlord. His eyes flashed with a new, borrowed strength. I belong to Dante, Julian said, his voice ringing clear in the large room. The dead is claimed. If you touch me again, he will kill you. And I will let him. Lord Thorne slumped, defeated by the sheer undeniable force of the bond radiating off us. He signed the papers with a shaking hand. We drove back to the city in silence, the rain once again hammering against the roof of the car. Julian sat in the passenger seat, holding a compress to his bruised cheek. He watched me drive, his gaze intense, heavy. "You came," he said softly. "I keep what I catch," I replied, shifting gears. "I told you that. You destroyed my father's gate. I'll send him a bill." Julian let out a short, wet laugh. He reached across the console, his hand finding mine on the gear stick. His fingers interlaced with mine, small, pale, but holding on with a grip of steel. "I wasn't sure," he admitted. "When they took me, I thought maybe the whistle really was just a whistle. That maybe you'd be relieved to be rid of the burden." I pulled the car over to the side of the road, the city lights blurring through the wet windshield. I turned to him, unbuckling my seatbelt to lean close. "Julian," I said, my voice rough. "I don't do things by accident. I don't miss targets. And I don't whistle at things I don't intend to own." I brushed my thumb over his bruised cheek. "That night on the bridge," I confessed, the truth finally clawing its way out. "I didn't whistle to mock you. I whistled because I saw you step toward the edge, and for the first time in my miserable life, I felt fear. I needed you to look at me. I needed you to step back. Because if you had fallen, I think I would have jumped right after you." Julian's eyes widened, shimmering with fresh tears. "Soulmates?" he whispered, the word hanging in the air like a spell. "Something like that," I grumbled, leaning in to kiss him, gentle this time, a promise rather than a possession. "Now, are you going to demand I take responsibility, or can I finally take you home?" Julian smiled, and for the first time, the blush on his cheeks wasn't from fear or shame. It was from victory. "Drive, Alpha," he commanded softly. "Take me home." And that is how the mad dog found his leash, and how the boy on the edge learned to fly without falling. If you enjoyed seeing Dante lose his composure for the sake of his obsession, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you trap a dangerous man to save your own life, or would you take your chances with the fall? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.